This is Coffee Chat, Subcontracting 101, hosted by the CALSAGA Ambassador Committee. Our panel moderator is Ashlee Cervantes, CALSAGA Vice President and Chair of the CALSAGA Ambassador Committee.
Our subcontracting conversation today, we are very lucky that I won't be just interviewing one great mind, but rather three. So I would like to introduce our panelists today. First up, we have Bryon, who is a past CALSAGA president, and current title is Security Industry Enthusiast, which is definitely a title I need to work on getting myself. Mr. Bryon is a very special person in my world. He actually was the first face I met through CALSAGA when he was a newly elected board member, I believe at the time. And he's been in the security industry since 1995. Bryon, did I get that right?
Actually, 1977.
1977. Wow. That is amazing. As I mentioned, Mr. Baer was CALSAGA president between 2012 and 2014. So we're so fortunate to have him and all of his expertise on today. Then we have Brendan Kelly, founder and CEO, I believe is your current title with GuardGuru. Is that correct?
It is.
All right, and we're going to hear all about that, I'm sure, as we talk through our conversation. If you haven't heard of GuardGuru, you definitely are going to want to check that out. But Brendan began his role in the security world and airline security in 2001. Did I get that number correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep, there it is.
I graduated.
And then he went into the contract private security industry in 2004. And so we are very excited to have him on today. He's got lots of great experience from a number of different companies, big and smaller companies, and then now his experience in GuardGuru, which will be really beneficial for all of you listening in today. So thank you so much for being with us today, Brendan. Last but not least, we have Shaun Kelly, and I'm sure almost everybody here at least knows of Shaun Kelly, and if you don't, you definitely want to get to know him. He is the Senior Vice President Risk Advisor with Tolman and Wiker Insurance Services. He's also the CALSAGA Network Partner with over 25 years of experience in the insurance industry. He's a commercial insurance risk advisor specializing in security, energy, construction, and agriculture. And I'm 99% sure I got all of those details correct because I've heard you share them a few times now, Shaun. Fantastic. So once again, thank you so much for being here. We're very excited. Again, this is just a wealth of knowledge that all of you get for free. So we're going to get started here in just a moment. I'm going to ask Kate to pop up some poll questions, and we will share those in a little bit. But first, we'll kind of get the ball rolling with some questions while all of you work on those poll questions. There's a few different ones on there. So just to further introduce our panel, I'm going to talk through some of these poll questions with them out loud while all of you answer them. So we'll go in order with Bryon first. What category would you say that you kind of fit into? If that poll question popped up there, Bryon, you can pick one of those categories. I think I know the answer to this, but would you say that you spent in your time in the security industry a lot of time subbing out other work to other PPOs, collecting work from other PPOs, or a mixture of both?
A mixture of both, more on the subbing it out rather than receiving.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense from my knowledge and working with you over the years. What about you, Brendan? Which categories would you say the companies you've worked with over your time in the industry fit into?
Yeah, depending on the size and scale of the company, it varied between, like, larger companies would always sub out the smaller work, the stuff that they don't want to deal with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe in an area that they're not used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it, we've been subbed also like $15 million in work before through large contracts. I have to, sub some of their stuff out to small business owners or minority owned, that kind of stuff. So it varies. It could be a sink or swim on that one.
Absolutely. Now, Shaun, obviously you're not in the security business per se, but your experience with your security clients, what would you say the mixture that you've worked with? Do you work with a lot of clients that give out a lot of work, that bring on a lot of work that way?
You know what? It varies a whole lot. Some of them do sub out some of the work, and I work with them in regards to their contracts and things like that. Some of them, you know, it's a mixture of both. I mean, with the volume of clients that I have, it's they are subbing, and then a lot of them are, you know, are subs to other PPOs. So it's a mixture.
Perfect. All right, I wanted to buy all of you a little bit of time to fill out those 3 poll questions. So obviously that was the first question for all of you. The second question was, have you ever used the CALSAGA member directory? And if you haven't, we'll share a little bit more about that towards the end, but it's a great resource to network and connect with other PPOs. And we're going to talk about how that's really important in the conversation around subcontracting. And then the third question, I won't ask this of the panelists, but what do you hope to get out of today's coffee chat? And you can check as many as are applicable in there. So once you've answered those poll questions, I will ask Kate to go ahead and close that out. And then Kate, I don't know if you're able to share the results, or if you want to just give us the top ones in the chat, that's fine as well. And while Kate does that, I will go ahead and just quickly share so that everybody, especially my panelists, know who you're talking to today. So it looks like the vast majority of people in the poll said, at 35%, they said a PPO who rarely does both prime and sub work. So we're talking to folks who majority wise don't do a lot of sub work, whether giving it out or receiving it. And then looks like 50% of the folks on have never used the CALSAGA member directory. So we're definitely going to chat more about that at the end. That's not something the panelists necessarily will speak to, although they probably will share a little bit about how their contacts within CALSAGA have helped them both receive and send out work. And then lastly, it looks like the majority of folks at 45% said all of the above. They were looking to find work through subcontracting, help. Where do I find PPOs I can trust to help serve my clients? 30% was the next highest, Shaun. So this one's for you. Subcontracting insurance tips. And then some folks also said, I have no idea where to start, but I want to both receive and send work with and to other PPOs. And then a good portion of people said they're just here for the networking and coffee, which fair. This was a great excuse for me to make a pit stop at Starbucks. So I am here for all of it with all of you. So let's dive in. My very first official question is actually more of a talking point. So I want to define subcontracting, because I know sometimes the language we use, especially for newer PPOs, I've been there personally, it can be a little bit confusing. And so some people might be thinking, wait, contracting, I thought I'm not supposed to 1099 security guards. That is correct. That's not what we're talking about here today. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So for today's conversation, to make it a little bit simpler, when we say sub, we're talking about a PPO who is receiving work from another PPO, okay? So if company A is hiring company B, company A would then be the sub in today's conversation. I'm so sorry, company B would be the sub in today's conversation. And then when we say prime, we're talking about the PPO who is contracting the work out. So in that same scenario, company A is giving work to company B. So company B is the sub, company A would be the prime. So just to make conversation a little bit simpler today, that's how we're going to define that. In essence, making company B's client is really company A, right? So if Guardian Protection Force is receiving work from Bear Protective Services, which is no longer, but if we were receiving that work, right, then really our client is Mr. Bryon Bear. And then whoever his client is his client, right? So any additional thoughts on the language around that, gentleman, or you can say pass, of course, but we'll let Bryon speak to that first. Anything that you think is important for everybody to hear on this kind of fundamental level, just to make sure we're all starting on the same page?
Sure. Yeah, I think you've defined it well. The client is the client that starts off with the prime and then can move down to a subcontractor. We're not going to get into the reasons right now why you would subcontract on this question. We'll get into that later. I think that you got to be careful how you do the subcontracting, and I'm going to plug CALSAGA right now in the membership directory. Just plug it, because any of the subcontractors I've used, with one notable exception, has always been through CALSAGA.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Brendan, any additional thoughts on that?
Only one. There's one category I'd like to add to that, and that'd be a super sub, as a new term. Well, newer to the most people, but those are the people you're subbing to sub out that subbed work.
Yeah.
Where you maybe have a partner in another state, you're subbing out to another region, but they're understaffed, so they're subbing out to another partner. They become a super sub. It's not a favorable model, and most companies don't like it, and it sort of breaches your contract with them. But it is relevant to a lot of the discussions.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a great note. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, just make it really simple. And I think that, just looking at the contract is going to be having the sub, and then the prime is the sub's client. And so you want to make sure that that is basically the relationship that you have in the subcontract agreement.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Contract is king, right?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's dive into this conversation. Now we're all on the same page. My first question for you gentlemen today: there's a lot of folks listening in that are looking to find work through subcontracting. So I'm curious, what is each of your respective recommendations on where to start that process?
Definitely through your networks. Talk to other security professionals, either your ASIS groups, your CALSAGA groups, InfraGuard, whatever network you're running that you deal with on a daily basis. That's really how you find the work. You want to let them know you're open to it if it comes up. If they have something in your area that's a little bit different, you want to look at companies that are responsible, are going somewhere, but may not be within your niche. You may, for Brendan and I, before it was like patrol, we knew patrol so well that so many other people would just say, "Hey, can you do this in Sacramento for us?" And Brendan would put a smile on his face and say, "Yes." and then we would do the work. And it's just, you've got to find the right connection and have a trust factor before you even start the conversation of working with someone else. Shaun will tell you that contract is absolutely king, but the integrity of the people you're dealing with is absolutely the most important thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So, Brendan, I know this is something you're very passionate about, speaking of networking specifically. So I don't know how you want to expand on that.
So my company specializes in that connection point. So a lot of subbing comes from larger companies, from out of state companies, sometimes out of country companies that don't have a license to operate in that jurisdiction. Whether it be some cities have requirements that you have to be licensed in that city, to provide security services. So you might not have an immediate in to whatever market you want to be in immediately. So a lot of times making those partnerships, or even cold calls, even to a company, if you hear through the grapevine that a company is trying to branch out in California, it takes a lot of money and time and resources to get out here and start up a branch and stuff like that. They'd much rather partner with somebody reputable that's established to create their roots there with you. Whether or not that leads to an acquisition or whatever else down the line, that's up to you. But those go hand in hand a lot of times. So there's companies in Florida, New York, New Jersey, a lot of East Coast companies. There's almost 10,000 security companies in the United States. California has 3,300 of them. And so all the rest are trying to get out here. They all want a piece of the Bay Area. They all want a piece of the SoCal market. So if those are your regions, just reach out to some of the larger companies that are, like the 10, 15, 20 million above, they're likely trying to get out here. And if they can partner with you and have a relationship with you, they'll try to find means to do that. Allied alone, subcontracts probably $100 million a year in work, easily. And that's probably understating it. So if you have a specialization, you want to market that. If you're really good with ODO work, or like Bryon said, if you're not many people actually operate a very good patrol network. Maybe they have 1 car, 2 cars, but they can't really accept any other work. They're already maxed out. But if you have an existing, Bryon had a network of, 20, 30 cars on the road. That's an easy blend to add into. So if you have an existing patrol network and patrol is not something another company does, that's a very good in, to introduce yourself, as a service to a service. Along with cannabis, but ODOs are big right now. So if you have armed people that are specifically ODO, meaning off-duty officers or retired law enforcement, that does not include military. Military is a different specialization, but it's a little more broader than ODO work. And ODO work pays very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are such great tips. I can say from personal experience, for smaller companies, especially when you just get started in the patrol world, it's really easy to lose money if you pick up clients that are really outside of your scope and outside of your route. And that's a great opportunity to reach out to a larger company that maybe already has a footprint in that space, and make those meaningful, intentional connections, right? And not lose money in the meantime, right? That's actually a money saving opportunity. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Brendan. Thank you. All right, Shaun, you work with so many different clients. What is your recommendation in this space?
My position in this is I always come in before or after. They'll call up and they'll say, hey, I'm looking at subcontracting, or you know what, I'm getting ready to subcontract and I need something. So I always recommend the CALSAGA network and just go, you know what, they're quality PPOs and that's what you need to focus on. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I walked into my first CALSAGA annual conference in 2011. It was in San Francisco. Bryon was the first person who greeted me, and I signed a subcontract agreement with him 2 weeks later. It was a phenomenal experience and really is what drew me into CALSAGA, and now here I am, very proud to serve as the vice president. So to Shaun's point, it's a phenomenal opportunity, and I'm seeing some buzz in the chat about like, how do we make these connections? You got to get out there. You got to make the connection in the first place. So we'll point you to some great resources. This is one of them, right? But you have to make the initial connection.
If I can make one more point.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
Mine first, Shorty. The idea there is, if you don't have the connection yet, that's what Brendan's business, the GuardGuru, is all about. He has the connections. Brendan and I worked together for a long time, but still, he'll get phone calls from me going, who do we know in Antioch? And Brendan will be like, it's 2:30 in the morning. You're lucky I'm awake. And then he'll tell me who it is. But call his phone 24 hours a day, and especially in the middle of the night. And he'll be able to tell you who the right connection is there. And that gives you, CALSAGA gives you a lot of credibility as you're walking into that kind of an arrangement. But
Absolutely.
Definitely having somebody that already knows both sides of the people can really help you. And that's what Brendan's for.
Fantastic point. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bryon. I have to pay you with ad rights. Jeez. What I was going to mention is, I would highly suggest to people of making sure that you are findable and approachable. To bring up a point about CALSAGA, the last conference, we had a booth there. Everyone registered. We had the full directory of every attendee. I knew who was going. Out of the 130 or 140 participants, I could only find the websites and service locations for 43 of those companies. All the rest I could not find, even knowing the name, what area you're from, your company name, your personal name, your phone number. I could not find those companies. So if I can't find you looking for you specifically, if I saw your car on the street, if I talked to one of your guards on the road, you know, at a safe way or whatever else, you know, if I can't ultimately find you, it's sort of pointless, right? So making sure your SEO is up to par, you're referenceable. If you're in Fresno, if you're in Stockton, if you're in Los Angeles, make sure your website's up to par, and ultimately you can be found. Otherwise, you don't exist. You frankly do not exist when people are looking.
Absolutely. And I don't know if we're going to have much to add to my next question, but I want to address it just in case. This is a lot of great points. So the next question is to flip that. So what if we need help? If I'm a PPO and staffing just feels impossible, but the work is just pouring in and I don't want to turn clients down, how do I go about finding quality subs to work with? Outside of everything else that we just recommended, is there anything additionally or anything if I'm looking for those quality subs that I should specifically do differently, or a certain spot to start versus if I was just looking to acquire the work?
Get it to your network. Get out there and network with the people. All of us PPOs are all pretty much in the same boat. I mean, we're all out there trying to do work. And like in Sacramento County is huge. And maybe I don't have the bandwidth to do work in South Sacramento, so I need something. Or maybe there's a niche. Maybe I need an armed guard. And I, for various reasons, don't deal in the armed world. But I do know who to call. And I got off the phone with him this morning just before this call, actually. So it's Guardian Protective Forces have been able to do great things for me over the last, God, now it's been 11 years. So 12 years almost. So you find the right companies and you do it. If you get in a pinch and you don't have time to fight the right company, or you don't already have a relationship, you call Brendan. Middle of the night, anytime, give him a call.
See, now I'm going to have to pay him in ad rights, Brendan. So no, that's a fantastic point though, right? And once you get to know, I think to that point that Bryon just made, you know, I think many security companies, especially on the smaller, that start on the smaller side, right? If you're just starting out, pick a lane and really just, you know, go with that and specialize, know your lane and specialize in it. And I think that's a great way to work with other PPOs, especially when you're just starting out. Now, as you grow bigger, you might decide to dominate multiple lanes, and that's fine. But you know, if you know your lane, you know what you do and you do it well, it's easy to advertise that to another PPO as much as a potential client, right? So yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. Brendan, you're up.
No, I everything that Bryon said. The only other problem with finding those partners is, you know, let's say you do have, I don't know, is this another question? But let's say you do are trying to find that partner, right? Whether or not you're looking to sub out work or trying to find it, making cold calls is a tedious task. I've done that myself for decades now, and it's the worst thing you do because you really find out your competition and how unresponsive they are. You know, you can call, you know, companies repeatedly and not get a response. You can email them, not get a response. Then you know how much better you are when on your operations. But it doesn't matter how much you're offering or what you're doing, they still won't answer their phone or respond to an email. It's mission critical to a lot of people, but it's a lackadaisical step in others. So what you need to really focus on is, you know, if you Google security companies in Sacramento, right, you might get the top 5, maybe top 7, and 3 of them will be alarm companies. You know, you'll have ADT, you'll have, you know, Brinks, you'll have everybody, but actual physical security providers. So when you're looking for those are the people who actually invest in their SEO. You know, invest in advertising and ad spend. They spend money to make sure you know that they're open to communications. if you're trying, like I had to find a vendor in Fresno 2 weeks ago. I had such a hard time doing that. Even they were CALSAGA network partners too. No calls back, no emails back. I had to call them a few times. Even the company I did hook them up with a referral, which I found out Stockton. I didn't get any follow up from them. Hey, how'd this go? How did were we able to service them right? Still no response. So I'm never going to use them again. So they lose out on a lot of opportunity. And that same client who I represented represents $10 million worth of business in California. They're in Ohio. They want to, they don't want to come here, but they have work here. And, whether or not that be with tech companies or whatever else, it's a lot of like structure that they don't have, infrastructure here. So when you make those critical mistakes and aren't responsive and don't answer your phones, and you have the opportunity to make a lot of money and you have a lot of opportunity to lose a lot of money. So it depends on how you want to run your business, but those are mission critical things that are really laxing right now. And that drastically affects your reputation. Reputation referrals are everything in this industry. It's probably like Reno, right? The biggest little city in the world. Security is the same thing. It's the biggest little industry in the world. Everyone knows each other from somehow, somewhere. It could go back 30 years, could go back 1 year. But your name with either good annotation or bad connotation will always be driven. And everyone on this call has good reputations. Hopefully, we can all maintain that. But just those two examples I gave you, bad reputations right off the bat, and they'll lose out millions of dollars of work, because of that. So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I can personally speak to this. I think for the first 5 or 6 years in business, all of our growth was word of mouth, right? And as a small company, and I know we've got a range of sizes on this call, of course, but for those of you that are in the smaller space or you're just getting started, that is such an important piece of advice. All right, Shaun, wrap us up. And I promise we're going to get to the stuff that you really love to talk about very soon, Shaun. Yeah. But any final thoughts?
Just the last thing I have is if you have, licensed PPOs, licensed officers, you have an asset that other people want. Okay, that other people need, because every one of my clients is saying, you know what, Shaun, I can't get enough. Okay, so get out there and tell people that, you know what, hey, you have some resources for them to help them, satisfy their clients, provide services. So the next network as much as possible, tell people that you're out there. So
I love that tip, Shaun. And I think that is so valuable. At one point when we were just getting started, I think that subcontracted work from other PPOs represented like almost 40% of our portfolio. It is a really great opportunity for those of you that are just getting started in the space, or those of you that maybe have been in the space for a long time, but and you've established your lane. What a great tidbit. I'm like, want to put that up on a quote wall somewhere, Shaun. Like, licensed officers are a resource. You have something that other people want if you have licensed security officers. And I know my co-chair, Justin Frazier, shared with our committee, our ambassador committee, when we were planning out this conversation, a really cool story. And I'm sure if you get to connect with him in the breakout afterwards, but he went through kind of a rough season. He had lost a large client. He had these officers and he didn't want to lay them off. They're so hard to get quality people. And he shared with our committee, and I hope it's okay that I'm sharing that, but he went and reached out to a contact that he had, and he was able to get some sub work and keep those folks busy so he didn't have to lay them off and lose that talent during that time. And I think that's just a great example of how important these networks and this connection to other PPOs is. And I certainly have been in that exact same boat. And I've called Bryon up, I don't know how many times, like, hey, we just lost this major account. I don't want to lose these quality people I have on it. What do you have for me? So, Conrad as well, out of, Tracy, Stockton area, we have really good working relationships. So again, I want all of you to understand that that's how other people are doing business too, which brings me to my next question for the panel. So let's call out the proverbial elephant in the room. The thing I hear most often from folks that fall into that bucket, it was the largest bucket on our poll questions, of people who don't regularly either sub or receive work, right? They're neither a prime nor a sub. What are some of the biggest concerns when either taking on work from a fellow PPO or contracting it out, that you are aware of? And in a moment, we're going to talk about how to tackle those concerns. But let's just call out all of those concerns that people on this call are probably already thinking as we've been talking. We'll start with you, Mr. Bayer.
Well, definitely quality of work. You want to make sure that these people are going to take care of your client. Like Brendan said, your word is your bond. It's the biggest thing you have. This is my 46th year in the industry. And I think that you really need to make sure that you stay, what was it, Brendan, when you say birds of a feather flock together?
Yeah.
What my father used to say in the old days. And it's so true. So you get a quality security provider, and they'll be near and around other quality service providers. So you want to really make sure the quality of work. If you have any questions at all, if you're using TrackTick, send a phone down there, put them on TrackTick. If you're subcontracting 90 miles away, put them on the same reporting as you would your own people. Make sure that they are held to your same exact standards. Your dispatch center should treat them the same as reporting goes as you would your own people. Now, you got to be careful there because of co-employment, and you've got to be careful that, that you're not dictating their hours to them. They work for your subcontractor. You dictate to your subcontractor what you want. They dictate to their employees what they need to provide. But you can put like the TrackTick tool in, or other tools that you might want to use. And the rest of the ideas that you set out for us, Ashlee, in the briefing for this, are almost all Shaun, because it's all about the contract. It's all about, this is what happens. If you want to steal the client, that's not a problem. It just costs you $20,000 if you'd like to do that. Or if you want to steal the employee, you figure out what the amount of money is and you make it happen. I think for me, always been the biggest problem has been, not the biggest problem, but my biggest concern in doing it, and I've been very lucky with the subs, is the quality of work. Brendan?
I completely agree. It's everything I have on my list, but but then again, we've done that subcontracting stuff forever for together. But yeah, a lot of it's ask about their technology and quality assurance tools, like Bryon said. If they have a GPS provider, even if they have a GPS tool for breadcrumb reporting, get those quality assurance reports daily. Don't wait until they're submitting invoices, and here's everything, so you don't have time to review everything. Get those reports daily, and that way you can have active feedback with that contractor, with the sub. Otherwise, you're sort of setting yourself up for failure at that point. Another thing is ask about their field supervision, the reporting procedures. How do they, is their supervisor in the field? Is their manager? Do they have to, do they have a dispatch center? Do they have, is it just a guy with the phone on his coffee table, at 2 a.m? What's the escalation process for them? So if they are doing a fire watch for you, do they have fire watch procedures? Are they able to provide fire watch services in that county, or that city? Are they able to? That's another one. It's, because like Sacramento County, for instance, you have to be a preferred provider by the fire department. You can't just be a willy-nilly fire watch provider. So the fire marshal dictates that. It comes with heavy fines. Do they are their PPOs active? I know of $20 million companies right now that their PPOs are not active.
Minor detail, small potatoes,
Yeah.
Brendan.
So it's not just to the company with 10 employees. It could be the company with 1,000 employees. Things happen. Bureaucracy at its best. The larger they are, the harder they fall, kind of thing. So you never know if their licenses are up to date. If they are doing armed work, if you're subbing armed work or ODO work, Ask them for their post certificates, ask them for their CCWs, ask them for their arms certifications, get all that stuff compiled and sent to you before even, hey, here's who we're going to have working. His name's so-and-so. So you're covering all your bases. You're providing a quality tool and services to your client, because you're the ultimately the one responsible, right? They're not going to fire your sub. They're going to fire you and never deal with you again. So you're representing your subs. And the other thing is to keep note of is payment terms. Know when they're going to pay you. There's a lot of companies that they will pay you after net 90. If you're a smaller company, can you afford to pay your invoices and float your employees for 90 days without being paid? So that's mission. There's a lot of large companies that cannot do that. So, see what the terms of payments are, the scope of work, get that scope of work in writing and provide that in writing to your vendors as well. So they have an actual checklist of here's what I'm responsible for. That way, if they come back and say, well, no, you still owe me, but you didn't provide the work. Well, you never said that. Well, no, here's a proper scope of work I gave you with everything in writing, dictating exactly what you need to do during your stay there. So those are a lot of things that really come into play on that one.
Absolutely. I know that's a lot of information, folks. So Shaun, we're gonna let you kind of put a pretty bow tie on all of that, right? We're speaking to both the concerns of the prime. What is the concern if I give work to another PPO and they may or may not do a good job, but also the concerns of the sub. Well, I don't know if I should take work from another PPO. Like, what if they don't pay me, right? What are the from an insurance perspective, what are some things that you've seen?
That's a lot of information that was just laid out there in regards to all the services and expectations and all this other stuff. I have come to the conclusion that contracts are really good things to have. It is an agreement between two parties that lays down the groundwork and lays down the rules and the guidelines, and so everybody can follow those things. Contracts are a really good thing. Before getting into any subcontract agreement if you're subbing out work to somebody else, the first thing you should do is probably get a good subcontract agreement together. And then you can work out the services later. What my specific thing, just to wrap it up in a nice little bow, like Ashlee said, is the contractual risk transfer. Okay. You're hiring someone to do the work. Okay. Of which now that person, you want to be held harmless and indemnified in case something goes wrong. Okay. And a lawsuit occurs. So you really have to look at the insurance requirements and the indemnification clause in the contracts to make sure that they're solid. Okay. Make sure that you are putting in there that they are, the complete hold harmless agreement and indemnification, that they will hold you harmless from, the claims resulting from the work performed in the contract. Okay. And then, which a lot of people don't know, and I want to make sure I'm really clear, is that you can get certificates from your subs, okay, and they're going to name you as additional insured. They're going to provide a waiver of subrogation. They're going to be primary non-contributory, okay, and you want all that stuff in there. If you don't have a contract and it's not in writing, that certificate is not covering you and it's not protecting you. In the insurance policy, it states that in order for an additional insured to be valid, it must be in a written contract. So the subcontract is super important to have before even going out and soliciting subs to do some work. So you want to make sure that that wording is in there, run it by your broker, making sure that it's correct, okay, and that the wording's in there. Because if it's not, okay, and it's not in writing, yeah, they can give you a certificate, but they're not going to indemnify you. They're not going to defend you in case something happens out on one of the sites. And that's really, super, one of the main things that why a contract is so good, okay? And then you want to make sure that the limits, okay? You could ask for $1 million limit, but what if the client that you're requiring the subs, you're hiring the subs for, requires you to have 5 million limits? So the limits should mirror your client's limits. Okay. So each contract might need to be modified a little bit here and there to meet the requirements of the the prime's client. Okay, to make sure that the limits meet those standards. Okay, please check that out, because you could be sitting there with just getting $1 million limit, but your client is requiring you to have 5. Who's going to be responsible for the additional 4? Okay, and so you got to check that out. And then the insurance market is changing daily, okay, really fast. So let's get, for instance, you have a special event where you need to get some additional subs to help you, meet the contract requirements. So you're going to sub out to somebody. Make sure that the sub does not have an exclusion for crowd control, special events, or any exclusion where there could be liquor served. Some of these policies now are getting very, very detailed in regards to what is included and what is excluded. So making sure that your sub can perform the duties and does not have an exclusion on their policy for the work you're asking them to do is something you have to check also. So that's just like wrapping it up in a nice little bow, okay, and getting it together. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot of good stuff. You can focus on the services, but then on the risk transfer side it's something you have to also focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a beautiful bow, Shaun. I do have like a quick follow-up question just for you on that. This is something in my experience, being a sub and being a prime, what's the most common, or what do you think makes the most sense for us when we go to our client? We typically give them our contract, right? But from what you're saying, it sounds like maybe it should more often be the prime having the sub sign their contract. Is that kind of your experience, or does it not matter just as long as there's something?
Yeah, but that's a good point. Okay, because when you're talking about risk transfer, there's tiers. So you have the client, then you have the prime, and then you have the sub. So
right.
Is there going to be that responsibility to indemnify the client from the sub? Should be in the contract, okay, stating that this is, the wording should be in there that the sub will also indemnify the client in the contract, because this doesn't happen very often where the sub would actually have a contract with the client. So it has to be transferred within the contract,
right,
to have the client indemnified as well as the prime indemnified in the contract. Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of gaps that are in there that happen, and it causes confusion. And
yeah, that makes total sense.
Misleading,
Yeah, for sure. That is mind blown, and here I am 12 years in, and I'm learning every CALSAGA event. All right, we are running a little low on time because we want to make sure we save time for networking, so I think we'll see if we can squeeze in 2 more questions, but this might be the last one depending on how it goes. Now, none of us are attorneys, right? And if anyone here is in need, CALSAGA does have a phenomenal legal partner in Bradley, Gamellick, and Wellerstein LLP. But on a very high level, in the contracts we either sign or write, like we just talked about, what are some of the pitfalls that we want to make sure folks are watching out for? And I'm going to send just some notes in the chat from summarizing what we've talked about, but any other pitfalls contractually that you've either seen or you just want to advise folks to be wary of, in addition to what Shaun just spoke of?
Make sure your contract's signed before you start. We've got, there's a CALSAGA member, Lawrence Borkins, who's down in Stockton. And I've subcontracted worked with Lawrence at different times over the years. And he always bothers the hell out of me because it's 5:30 at night. Client wants something now. And Borgins says, no problem. As soon as I have the signed contract, I'll get somebody out there. It's 5:30 at night. You're in your car, you're on your way home. It's like, all right, send me the paperwork and I'll sign it. Okay. And if you don't sign it, there's not going to be anybody there. But it's a real good example of self-discipline, and it keeps you in a very, very good spot. because as Shaun said, with insurance, we all think we run our own business. We all think that the bank may be our most important ally. It's not. It's your insurance company, because your insurance company can tell you tomorrow that while you have all these wonderful convictions, that you're going to have to do something you don't want to do. And they mean it. An insurance company could shut you down faster than BSIS. So you want to make sure that everything's in writing with your insurance company and your insurance policy. You want to read that policy very carefully. You want to make sure you deal with somebody like Shaun Kelly, who's been at this a long time and knows what should be in that policy. Everything else is just a checklist, folks. The world's out there for us to make money at. Let's just go do it. Brendan?
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, you don't, to that point, you don't have to say yes to everything. And don't push your risk either. If you're providing a service that is not your bailiwick, don't provide it. If you don't have a specialization in that and you have no experience in it, but you're representing yourself, don't do it. You don't have to do it. Be that super sub if you can, but and it's a lot of those times, it's about pricing, right? To some, to me, it's not. I'm actually very wary of the companies that will say yes without knowing the price. And then on top of that, when they give me the price, it's too low. I've had to tell at least a dozen companies over the past year alone, your quote's too low. Why is it too low? What are you paying your employees? If you're paying your employee minimum wage, the likelihood that you're going to have an employee there is slim to none. So you're exasperating your own risk, by providing the subpar services, knowing they're the cheapest solution. So negotiate those rates correctly. You don't have to, if you get a 55 an hour bill rate and somebody's willing to do it for 25 an hour, there's something wrong there, because they have to count for overtime. They have to account for the training, the plus the margin alone, right? So nobody has elves on a shelf. So, you have to be able, so all these guards are being provided overtime. And if they do have elves on the shelf, I want to know their secret, because it's hard to say, who does. But try to judge that. Guards should be $5 to $10 above minimum wage at minimum, for basic guard work, meaning they should be the $20-$25 an hour range right now. Otherwise, you're competing with Chipotle. In-N-Out pays better than most security companies right now. So you have to keep that in mind. But pay attention to those that are really low, and then just work it out with them. But be very cautious.
Absolutely. That's a great tip. Shaun, another pretty bow for us. You did such a great job with the last bow. This
one's perfect. The only pitfall, well, not the only pitfall, but the major pitfall is not reading the contract.
Yeah,
absolutely. If you're just going to go sign it, then you know what? You're just waiting for something bad to happen. So review it. Contracts are made to be negotiated. Okay. If there's something in there that you don't like, take it out. If there's something in there that you want to add, put it in. So don't be afraid to go back and forth with your client. When your client is asking you, we're not even talking about subs, it's just a client, and you're the prime, and your client's asking you for certain things that you can't provide, take it out of the contract. So remember, read the contract.
Those were terrific golden nuggets to end on. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and time with all of us here today. I would like to invite each of you, my panelists, to stay for the breakout rooms. Kate just put the breakout room topics for networking in the chat. So if you guys are interested in staying with us, we'll be on till about 11:15, 11:20. Kate doesn't just kick us out of the breakout room. So in your individual breakout rooms, you can stay as long or as little as you'd like. But as for one more golden nugget, I want to leave with all of you. I saw this going back and forth in the chat. A lot of folks were looking for the free resource, like how do people find me? So you have amazing resources like GuardGuru, but as CalSAGA members, you do have a free resource in the member directory. So Kate sent that in the chat. Please go in and check it out. So it's twofold. As a member company, you want to make sure that all of your information, your company information, including the contact details, is up to date, because like Brendan said earlier, when a prime is looking to sub out some work and you don't answer the phone, or you have the wrong information on the CalSAGA member directory, or your Google search isn't up to date and they can't find you, or you don't answer the phone, then you're not going to get that work. So make sure that your information is up to date first and foremost in the CalSAGA member directory. That's part of your membership with CalSAGA. It's one of the benefits, and then build out from there. Make sure your search engine optimization, your SEO is up to date. Reach out to Brendan. He's a terrific resource. Like Bryon said, at 2:30 in the morning, that's when he loves to get calls from us. So that's his favorite time of day. Before we transition to the breakout rooms, because again, networking, this is a really great opportunity for all of you on. So I'm not gonna, guilt you into staying, but if you are looking to make those connections, this is one of those opportunities you don't want to miss out on. But before we do that, I just want to say a giant thank you to my committee, starting with my co-chair, Justin Frazier from Epic Security, Conrad, who's also on the board of directors with CalSAGA, and Manny Jimenez as well. And a giant thank you to Kate and her team, including Ali Moyer. We are so thankful for all of the hard work that everyone puts in so that we can have opportunities to grow and learn together just like this.
This has been Coffee Chat, Subcontracting 101, hosted by the CalSAGA Ambassador Committee. For more information about CalSAGA, visit calsaga.org.